It wasn't until we actually found receipts in his glove compartment for Dark Occult Witchcraft Store that we put two and two together. Peter the Pincushion was using the curse of the dark box to scare away people while he was stealing money secretly from the circus treasury. Here's your look. The new NECA Toys is the Toony Terror's Hellraiser Pinhead. Bring the fun of Saturday morning cartoons to your horror collection with these adorable little creeps. Pick your favorites or collect them all and make every day Toony Terror time. Before we go ahead and get this review underway, I want to also send out a big mad props thank you to the folks over at NECA Toys. Mad props, you living in the early 2000s, perhaps. To the very top. It was the early 2000s, wasn't it? It could have been even earlier. According to the tape measure, though, fast tracking our way around that. According to the tape measure, though, we're looking at a figure standing 5.7 inches. He does seem a little shorter, doesn't he? Doesn't he? Switching that over to centimeters, let's stay on track. 14.6, about 14.5 centimeters tall. Yes, he does seem a bit small, doesn't he? Let's bring in one of the other figures that we had a look at. A glorious-looking Michael Myers from the Toony Terrors line. Was that Series 2? Wave 2? Do we even say waves anymore? Oh, that's so early 2000s. Anyways, here is Jason Voorhees. Who else do we have? Here is Freddy Krueger. He is shorter, technically, than Pennywise, or than Pinhead here. I think it's just for the fact that he is crouched down, and still here is the remake, Pennywise the Clown, still absent over here. And a empty seat where lone Tiny Tim would have sat would have also been the space where we would have had Tim Curry's Pennywise the Clown, still absent in this review. I have put out a missing person paper, somewhat ironic that I'm doing that for Pennywise the Clown. Hopefully he'll turn up. In the meantime, though, you can see that Pinhead is... yeah, a little short versus some of the other figures. Kind of hoped he could have been a little bit taller, maybe at the very least, because after all, when I think Pinhead, I think of slender, lanky, and really, really tall. If he had maybe just been a little taller, maybe to the point of, well, I mean, even to the point of Michael Myers, but I was even going to say to Jason Voorhees, it probably wouldn't be so stark, the comparison. But you can definitely see that he is a little bit shorter than some of his other Toony Terrors comrades. Let's have a look at the lone trinket to come included with Pete the Pincushion. Nicely me. The puzzle box in question is a very simplified version of the Lemmet configuration puzzle box, of course made famous in the Hellraiser films. Very simplistic. There's not really a whole lot of detailing to it. Now, certainly of multiple minds on this particular topic. You could look at it and simply think that they've skimped on details, skimped on paint. Then you have to kind of consider the universe in which these characters would inhabit. I'm sort of kind of torn when I'm looking at Pinhead as well. Based on the universe that they would have inhabited, the early cartoon eras would not have had a whole lot of detailing in pieces like this. They would have had some slight little details added, some decorations to it, but there certainly would not be to the extreme that we would see with the film versions of the puzzle box. So based on this, and based on what it's supposed to represent, I think it's done just the right amount. Perhaps it could have been slightly a darker gold, but at the very least, you get the idea of what it's supposed to be. Usually animators would deliberately color things lighter so that you could make out things like this. If the box was darker in the cartoon, let's just use the argument that this was in a cartoon, you would not be able to see as much of this happening. So they obviously would have made it a little bit lighter, perhaps the color of what you're seeing right here, like a spicy mustard. I don't like spicy mustard, by the way. The figure, as you can probably see here, is already kind of sculpted with the intent that he's supposed to be holding the puzzle box. Leading to, of course, one worrisome problem that will come with a figure like this, is if you happen to lose the puzzle box, what do? Well, you could run outside, perhaps in your boxer shorts, run down the street and yell, "I've lost my puzzle box, I've lost my puzzle box." Police likely will be visiting you and just saying, hello, come on, just sit in the back of the car for a second. So don't do that. But it does certainly leave the argument making available that perhaps they could have potentially had the figure already with the puzzle box in his hand. I mean, in a way, it would guarantee that you wouldn't ever lose it. Some would say that the articulation would then suffer as a result of it. So really, again, the arguing point, two sides of a coin, I guess, would be the fact that, yes, you could run the risk of losing it. If it fell out of his hand, you could cry and run down the street and nobody really would care. But it certainly is an issue. So if you want to pick this one up for yourself, I would definitely recommend that you do. I would say, though, yeah, you just be careful that you don't lose the puzzle box. One workaround, though, to it, and one thing you could always do, too, is because he does have articulation in the arms, and he has articulation in the hands and the forearms, you, in a way, could recreate almost the same gesture that he has in Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, where he kind of does that crucifix, or sort of does the thing, you know, standing at the podium pedestal. You could have him pose like this. And I guess in a way you could really put the puzzle box still in his hand. Again, you're just going to have to be balancing a little bit more to it. And then again, you could just kind of have the arm relaxed, bring the hand around like that. And you could kind of have it something like that. The arm looks a little on the broken side. This arm looks a little on the broken side. But I guess there are workarounds in case you happen to lose this box. Don't lose this box, whatever you do. For the figure itself, let's get his arms back in place because I feel like that's going to drive me bananas. Having a look at his face, it's not bad, actually. There are a few things, perhaps. The fact that he doesn't have the true pins sticking out from his head. They're not as high as I would have wanted them. Arguers could certainly say the fact that the coloring is absent, like the pins, for example, aren't colored any bit a different color than the rest of his face. Again, you have to kind of take perspective of where these Toony Terrors would inhabit. Again, if you were seeing them in a cartoon and they were running around, chasing around the gang and their trusty dog, perhaps they wouldn't have colored in the pins. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But NECA Toys opted to go with a non-painted face, or at least in the sense that the pins aren't painted. It doesn't bother me as much, although I truthfully would have loved the pins just a little bit longer, though. These are kind of more like studs. The heads of the nails more than the actual pins. If the pins had just been simply longer, I think I would have liked the fact that they were still not colored in black, and that you could still make out his face. But if the pins were just simply a little bit longer. The face sculpt is good for a more cartoonier, more animated version of Pinhead. I don't think you would ever see Pinhead in an animated feature, certainly not one intended for kids. But again, it's a pretty good-looking face. I can't help but look at it and feel, perhaps because of these more profound lines on the sides of his cheek, I feel a little bit like I'm looking at the Creeper from also Jeepers Creepers. Here in a case, I have to also ask myself, could they have animated the face just a little bit more? I guess the hard part is how much more animated could you give a character that's very so monotoned on expression as Pinhead? Could you have given him a smile, perhaps? Could you have given him like a yelling gesture? I don't think so. It works okay for a character like, for example, Pennywise, and it works perfectly fine for a character like Freddy Krueger. Perhaps a character like Pinhead doesn't really necessarily need a whole lot of expression. So again, it's a debated topic. At the very least, my takeaway, and if I was to pack up shop and leave for the night, I think I would ultimately say, if the pins were just a little bit longer, the coloring could have stayed the same, and the face could have been kept all one neutral color. But at the very least, maybe if the pins were just a tad bit longer, beating a dead horse, I know. Moving down, we've got the very familiar Cenobite outfit, of course the opening, and these aren't quite slashes. Instead they look like strips of fruit roll-up. Again, they want to kind of keep it as tame as they possibly can. The tools of the trade certainly are still there on his belt. As we move our way further down, we have the bottom of his skirt, which is sort of basically just cupped off. I mean, it's just basically like the piece of a giant chessboard. I don't know what character this would represent. The king? The knight? I don't know. Either way, though, it does... the fact that he doesn't have legs isn't so much disappointing because ultimately you're just going to really have the figure sitting on a shelf like that. You really don't necessarily need to have legs. I mean, if it's only just for you to go up and go like this every once in a while. Is the leg still there? Whoosh, still there. That's ridiculous. And that's not a reasoning why a figure should have legs. So you can go up periodically. Whoosh, legs are still there. But overall, not a bad looking figure. Could it have been a little bit taller? Yes. Could it have longer pins? Absolutely. But the coloring in the face is something I still find is pretty good. And the overall body and execution for Pinhead is quite good as well. Let's have a look at his articulation. His head rotates all the way around. In this case, it doesn't seem like he does have a ball joint. In the case of this, it seems like he's only got a swivel that goes all the way around. The arms also hinge all the way around. I guess if you wanted to, you could have him looking like he... Oh, could we do it? Could we do it? I haven't done this yet. He could be doing the thing where he's patting his head and rubbing his tummy. Remember doing that as a kid? And everybody thought they were so clever, like their brain could so function with two different, two different tasks. Well, he can do that as well. I never really thought of that. I knew he could put his head on there, but I never really put 2 and 2 together. That's kind of funny. So as I said, I got distracted by myself here. The arms rotate all the way around. You can swivel the forearms at the elbows, and you can also swivel the hands. It's entirely up to you what you want to do with them specifically. The waist has no articulation, and of course, because he just is a stump, sort of the doll cozies. Your grandmother ever make these? The cozies that go over toilet paper? Grandmothers had a lot of time on their hands. Very, very intricate craftspeople. But boy, oh boy, they had a lot of times on their hands. Doilies and, like I said, the dolls that went over top of toilet paper and toilet paper boxes. I had those. At least my grandmother had those. But he doesn't have any articulation. That's what I was really wanting to talk about. No articulation, and of course he has no feet. Wrapping up this review, I don't know whether I really want to put him in the tapping of his head and rubbing of his tummy-tum, but I think ultimately I'm just going to put him with the puzzle box in his hand. I guess my takeaway now, few moments later after initially proposing this concept, I guess at the end of the day I'm not too bothered by the fact that he does have articulation in the arms. If ultimately, knock on wood, this doesn't be the case, but if I ultimately do lose the puzzle box, there's still stuff I could do other than him just being a mime, holding something that should be in between his hands, like, oh, I don't know, like an invisible puzzle box. Well, like every other criminal in these cartoons, you know that Pete the Pincushion, things didn't end very well for him. Ultimately, when it was all said and done, he took a few dollars here and there only to find a life behind bars. That'll teach you, Pete the Pincushion. This figure of Toony Terror's Hellraiser Pinhead is decent enough. I don't know if I like it as much as the Michael Myers. Michael Myers is really, really good. I'm trying to think of things that stumble for this particular figure. It's not the fact that he's necessarily missing the legs or the feet. Again, that's only working if you look at the underside of his skirt. Shame on you. But the figure does have decent enough traits to it. I like the head portrait. I wish, again, like the pins were a little bit longer. I don't know if I would necessarily have colored the pins, so that's something that NECA Toys, I think, did right, not coloring those in. It looks a little bit more like something you would expect from an old 80s cartoon, but the pins could be just a little bit longer. The figure as well could feel like he's a little on the short side, especially when you stack him up against all the others. The only one that is as small as him, perhaps even smaller, is the Freddy Krueger, but again, it's only because he's crouched over. I'm trying to think also for the fact that all the other figures sort of are just in standing poses other than Freddy Krueger. I guess Pennywise has slightly bent knees and he's kind of in a dancing position, but I'd love to see some of these Toony Terrors kind of get more crouched or action poses. I think we're going to be getting that more so with the upcoming look at Leatherface. Oh, I just gave it away. You guys are smart, you already knew that. Either way, though, let me know down below what you guys think of Pete the Pincushion, or Pinhead, as he also commonly goes by. Do you like the figure? Always like reading your comments down below. And certainly stay tuned, because we're still going to continue our looks at Toony Terrors. I'm going to kind of find some elaborate way of opening the review with some intricate story behind a character that would have inhabited the world of Scooby-Doo. Stay tuned. In the meantime, though, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. In the meantime, make sure you hit that bell notification. And in the meantime, make sure you stay tuned to this channel, because the future NECA reviews are in your immediate future. And I need a dark box to tell me that. I swear, promsies. Thanks for watching, guys, as you always do. And I'll see you guys next time.